Welcome to this exclusive explainer. We're diving straight into Polymer Bazaar's ABS, yeah, that's acrylonitrile butadiene styrene, weekly report and future trend for the fourth week of July 2026. If you're an exec, a trader, or on the procurement side trying to navigate these kind of turbulent global polymer markets, well, you've landed in exactly the right spot. We're going to unpack the data, look at the big regional shifts, and really help you strategize for the days ahead. But before we throw a bunch of numbers at you, let's just ground ourselves in where this intel is actually coming from. This explainer is built right on top of the latest insights from Polymer Bazaar, anchored by their core philosophy: price, prediction, profit. Look, in our industry, a fraction of a cent per metric ton can literally make or break a quarterly margin, right? So having that authoritative, real-time market intelligence, it's not just a nice-to-have anymore. It's absolutely your core competitive edge. And that's exactly the kind of clarity we're bringing to the ABS market today. All right, so here's our quick roadmap for today. First, we'll hit the Western bazaars, then swing over to the Asian bazaars, zoom in on some Indian bazaar highlights, and wrap it all up with a very clear strategic purchase recommendation. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the Western bazaars, looking at the contrasting dynamics in the US and Europe. So we're seeing a pretty stark divergence across the Atlantic right now. Over in the US bazaar, the story is all about input costs. Production costs are climbing, and that's being directly driven by higher styrene prices. Because those fundamental costs are going up, it's just physically pushing overall prices in the US market upward. But flip over to the Europe bazaar, and it's a completely different vibe. We're seeing some really poor offtake of finished products over there. And you know how it goes. When finished goods aren't moving, processors just sit on the sidelines, and demand stays completely dull. Because of that stagnant demand, free-delivered Northwest Europe, or FDNWE prices, have actually been dragged downward. So you've basically got cost-push inflation in the US, while dead downstream demand is pulling prices down in Europe. Moving right along to Section 2, the Asian bazaars, where we've got a real wait-and-watch situation happening in China. Right now, spot prices in the China bazaar are sitting at exactly 10,200 RMB per metric ton. But, that number alone doesn't really tell the whole story, does it? We've got to look at buyer psychology. Buyers in China are firmly planted in this wait-and-watch mode. Demand is dull, kind of like what we just saw in Europe, but here it's heavily driven by this massive cloud of uncertainty hanging over the bazaar. It's that classic nobody wants to catch a falling knife scenario. Absolutely no one wants to make a huge volume commitment when the market direction feels this murky. So they're just holding off, waiting for a definitive signal to clear up the fog. Now, before we jump over to the Indian markets, I want to quickly mention an incredibly powerful tool for those of you who need to cut through exactly this kind of market uncertainty, like instantly. To get your PP weekly report, future trends, and predictions sent straight to your WhatsApp, you've got to try Polymer Bazaar's AI-powered chatbot. Seriously, just WhatsApp the letters PP to +91 93746 24365. You'll get instant updates in literally 5 seconds. It's just a fantastic way to keep your finger right on the pulse without having it interrupt your workflow. Okay, let's dive into Section 3, Indian Bazaar highlights, focusing on rising crude and the buying pulse. Let's start by looking at the baseline offers. Overseas suppliers are still offering ABS cargoes for mid-August 2026 shipment at some very stable levels. The magic number you need to keep in mind here is about $1,550 per metric ton CIF India. So, on the overseas supply side, things are looking pretty steady at that price point. But the real action, that's happening over on the buyer's side. We are seeing a really distinct improvement in buying activity, and it's basically a defensive maneuver. Think about it. When international crude oil prices rise, the threat of higher feedstock costs pops up almost immediately. Converters are seeing the writing on the wall, and they are smartly choosing to buy right now at current prices to prevent a much higher cash out go down the line. They're actively locking in that $1,550 per metric ton rate just to protect their upcoming margins. It's a really sharp move. Which brings us perfectly to Section 4, our strategic purchase recommendation for navigating this upward pressure. We have to look at the macroeconomic domino effect that's practically guaranteed to happen if these current trends hold. Check this out. If styrene prices in the international bazaars keep going up, imports inherently become costlier. To match that super expensive imported feedstock, domestic production costs are inevitably going to increase, which ultimately forces domestic producers to hike up their ex-works prices. It is a textbook chain reaction, plain and simple. So the absolute crucial takeaway here is this. When you factor in the rising production costs in the US, the defensive buying posture we're already seeing from smart Indian converters, and that inevitable upward pressure on domestic exports prices, our strategic recommendation for the ABS market this week is a definitive buy. If you've got the capacity, securing cargo at today's rates is just the mathematically sound move to protect yourself against the looming cost push inflation that the feedstock markets are telegraphing. And that wraps up today's Market Intelligence Breakdown. For more of these highly informative predictions and insights, make sure you subscribe to the Polymer Bazaar YouTube channel. And hey, please share this explainer with your industry friends and colleagues who need to stay ahead of the curve. Don't forget to hit that bell icon for the latest notifications. Thanks so much for watching Polymer Bazaar. We'll catch you in our next informative update where we're going to be covering other commodity and engineering polymers. Oh, and if you're looking for buying and selling leads specifically for PP, definitely reach out directly to the relationship manager at +91 9313 924356. Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought to kick around with your procurement teams today. With international crude and styrene so clearly dictating global margins right now, is your current procurement strategy truly agile enough to beat that next inevitable ex-works price hike? That is the multi-million-dollar question this week. Stay sharp, stay informed, and we will see you next time on The Explainer.